This is Niceguy Eddie, and you're listening to In My Humble Opinion on Rainbow Radio.
Dad, I don't want to do my homework yet. Dad, I don't want to do my homework yet. Can we please just go outside and play catch instead, Dad? Can we please just go outside and play catch instead, Dad? Oh, come on. I'll do it after dinner. 'Kay, Dad? Oh, come on. I'll do it after dinner. 'Kay, Dad?
For all the two-dad families, happy Father's Day.
Awesome. Love you, Dad. Awesome. Love you, Dad.
A message from the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion.
Welcome, listeners, and I have to tell you, I am doing fantastic this evening because, of course, this is recording during the first day of the Republican National Convention, and it is every bit the train wreck that we all thought it would be. Longtime listeners might recall that way back when, and I've pointed to this a couple of times, so if you've been listening for a while, you've probably heard me say this, that I predicted very early on, actually before the primaries began, that Donald Trump would win the primaries, but that, and I said this somewhat jokingly, he would not actually be on the ballot come November. Now, I said he will probably have a meltdown and basically pull out right before the election. But as it is, it may look like he not even get that far. The Republican National Convention, it started out to basically a half-filled stadium. It was eerily quiet, very strange. The kid from Duck Dynasty led things off. He was the first speaker, and Scott Baio's speech was so bad, cable news actually cut it. Trump, on the way there, got into a car accident. Dump Trump protesters have dominated you can just hear them shouting in the background. It's been complete chaos. They had an online part of the convention that they had to actually shut down because within a very short time, white supremacists took it over and it became a Jew-bashing hate fest. Oh, and delegates from two states, Colorado and I cannot remember the other one, walked out. Colorado, well, their delegations walked out of the convention. And it's unclear if they're coming back. I've never seen anything like this. It is absolutely insane. And I'm stunned and I'm thrilled and I'm laughing and I'm weeping and everything at the same time because this is truly just, if this were my own party, I don't know what I would think. I've never seen a convention like this. But when you come to somebody like Donald Trump, you have never seen a front-running candidate win the primaries and yet be so despised by not just the party establishment, but by so much of the rank and file that people are at the convention in huge numbers trying to change the rules. And they did, by the way, get enough votes to at least have the rule opened up. I don't know as of the time of this recording if the rule has been changed. This is the rule that would allow delegates to decide that they don't actually have to vote for who they were told to vote for. In other words, to completely ignore democracy. Now, that's nothing that I find particularly surprising from the Republicans, but it is interesting that would be the case with this candidate and that it's happening this year. And Trump is actually less popular within his own party, at least if I'm to go by the sentiment shown at the convention, than Hillary Clinton is among the Democrats. And one has to remember that a lot of the Bernie Sanders supporters are not necessarily Democrats. So when I talk about her popularity amongst the Democrats, I'm talking about the party faithful. But yeah, this has been insane. And of course, this is also after Trump picks what some people believe to be a safe vice presidential pick, Mike Pence. Now, I've spoken about Mike Pence before because he, of course, made that clusterfuck of an anti-LGBT bill over in Indiana. Oh, I'm sorry. It was a religious freedom bill, but basically it pretty much just allowed people to discriminate against gays if they believed it was in their religion. There was really nothing else it did. That was really the effect of it and its purpose for existence. It was such a bad bill. Obviously, folks like us, folks like you, we all hated it. But it was such a bad bill that one of the Republican mainstays, namely Big Business, hated it. Big Business actually started to boycott Indiana. Conventions were shut down. Companies stopped. Didn't move jobs there. I mean, this actually cost the state of Indiana a lot of money. And by the way, North Carolina has been suffering a lot of the same fallout after their own bill. So again, as I've said it before, as a liberal, it is not my first choice to have the market be my tool to bring about social change. I'm not a libertarian. I'm not a free market guy, market principles guy, but I know they exist. And I have to tell you, folks, I am glad the market, namely big business, is in fact on our side on this one. That's a great feeling. But yeah, the absolute chaos at this. I tuned in at one point that some guy was called to the stage to speak, and the noise in the convention hall was so great, he basically just dropped the mic and walked off the stage. He never said a word. It It's a beautiful thing to watch. But back to Trump's choice of Mike Pence. You know, what is it with the Republican governors right now? You've got Sam Brownback, who's absolutely bankrupted Kansas. You've got Scott Walker, who's made an absolute asshat of himself over in Wisconsin. You've got Bobby Jindal, who's destroyed Louisiana. Rick Scott, absolutely despicable human being down in Florida. Of course, my own governor, Rick Snyder, who has poisoned an entire city with leaded water. What? I mean, what do we expect, right? I mean, these are their governors. These are their governors. And, of course, their senators, Mitch McConnell and, of course, Paul Ryan, Speaker of the House, have spent the last 8 years making sure that nobody did anything. So exactly what was their strategy coming into this election? It's really odd. And obviously it was to appeal to the hardest core right-wing conservatives out there, namely Donald Trump, who has been appealing to the bigotry of people in his anti-immigrant rhetoric, okay, for which he has been rightfully called a racist. Whether he is a racist or not, I don't know. I don't know what goes on in Donald Trump's head. I'm not sure that there actually is any rational thought going on. Like, I don't think he's actually saying, oh, I hate this such and such group, so I'm gonna rail against this group. I don't even think it's that well thought out. I honestly believe he doesn't know or care if it is about a group. He's just saying what needs to be said to rile people up, and he knows how to rile people up. He is a con man, he is a shyster, but he's a showman. And that is what he's doing. He's just riling up the base. Now, of course, who better to pick to rile up the base than who's arguably one of the most despised Republican governors in the country right now, Mike Pence. And by despised, I don't mean just by liberals, but by his own party. Many in his own party. Not, of course, again, not the hardcore right-wingers, not the hardcore Christian conservatives, okay, not the hardcore anti-LGBT group, but also not the hardcore pro-lifers. Mike Pence, in addition to being one of the most despicable governors in America, second maybe to McCrory down in North Carolina, when it comes to LGBT issues, of course, is also one of the most anti-choice governors in the country. So it's really... I don't know who else he could have picked. Maybe Greg Abbott of Texas. I mean, he put in a lot of goofy right-wing legislation that has since been struck down by the Supreme Court. I honestly don't know what their strategy was. And this has been, and as if it wasn't, and that was the other one. Omarosa. I don't know if you guys remember her. Omarosa has been named as Trump's official outreach coordinator to the minority community. Now, Omarosa, the name sounded familiar to me. I'm like, Omarosa, who is that? Who is that? She was a contestant. She was a contestant on Trump's reality show, first season of The Apprentice. So now he's hired her. He fired her back then. And one of the things you may remember about Omarosa, if you ever watched it, I did watch the first season of The Apprentice, which is probably why her name sounded familiar to me. But she was absolutely reviled by every single person that had to work with her. She was absolutely despised by every other contestant on that show. And I mean, I can't speak for the audience, but I mean, I just remember she was a horrible, horrible person on the show. Now, I don't know how she is in real life, just like I don't really know how Trump is in real life, but I know how he is on stage. I know how he is in public, and I know the persona that he presents in order to rile up the base by appealing to their baser instincts. Anyway, so, and to top it all off, of course, his own motorcade gets into a car accident on the way to the airport. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, it's almost like they heard that Murphy's Law was a law, and they said, well, if everything's supposed to go wrong, we better comply with the law. After all, we are the party of law and order, or law and chaos in this case. Anyway, it has been fun to watch, and the only thing is, now, I am making fun of it, and I do hope that between today and tomorrow, in other words, between the time that I'm recording this and the time that this actually airs, that something really terrible doesn't happen, because some of you may know that there were protest groups, both a white supremacist group and a Black Lives Matter group, that both said they were going to go and protest in front of the convention hall, armed, taking advantage of Ohio's open carry laws. Okay, and the RNC, I don't know, they appealed to the police to try to put a stop to this or to waive that law. They actually did eventually say no guns inside the convention hall. Originally, it was no knives, no swords, and no water guns. Now, someone might say, well, wait a minute, you're allowed to bring in real guns, but not water guns. Why not water guns? Water guns are often banned from these public places because, of course, they look like real guns, and someone might think you have a real gun. Yes, this is the kind of thinking... This is the kind of thinking that's going on here. These are the people that want to lead our country. And if there's one piece of hope in all of this, and I don't mean hope because I want the Republican Party to wither and die. And I want their entire disgusting right-wing conservative Christian movement to die with them. I make no bones about that at all. But if there were a bunch of people in this convention hall, I've never seen so many people that I agree with in a Republican convention, and namely this is the dump Trump crowd. These are the people that actually don't want to see him represent them, that believe he is thoroughly unqualified to be the President of the United States. And I have to say, hey, look at that. There's some sensible people at the RNC. Anyway, it is worth saying a word, too, about the Democrats in all of this. I endorsed Bernie Sanders early on. I voted for Bernie Sanders, in fact, in the Michigan primary, and there are circumstances under which I would still support Bernie Sanders moving forward. However, those are relatively unlikely, and under the assumption that this is going to be a Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump election, I, of course, am voting for Hillary Clinton without a second thought, and I really, really have a lot of issues with anyone who is not willing to do that. Not anyone. There are a couple of people that I understand their reasoning, but most people, I think, are just flat out insane or stupid, for lack of a more analytical term, to think that this is somehow an election where, oh, don't worry, we'll make a point. No, a vote that's not cast for Hillary Clinton is helping Donald Trump. Make no mistake about that. As much as you hate Hillary Clinton, she is a qualified candidate. Whether you like everything about, I don't like everything about her, but the fact is, I don't like anything about Donald Trump, and there are, in fact, things that Hillary Clinton and I agree on, and Hillary Clinton you agree on. Whether you think she's as bad as Trump or not, that simply means you haven't thought about it. Anyway, as it stands right now, there's a website out there called electionprojection.com. It's run by a gentleman named the Blogging Caesar. He is a conservative. I disagree with almost everything he writes. However, he does a fantastic job analyzing polling data. I've been following him since before the 2008 election. He's been running the blog, I think, going back to, I want to say 2004, so he's been doing this a long time. And currently, he has the Electoral College at 347 for Hillary Clinton, 191 for Donald Trump. That's a pretty solid victory. It's not what I would call a landslide, but let's just say I'm not particularly worried right now. By the way, that puts her pretty much in between Barack Obama's victory in 2008, 365 to 173, and his reelection by a lower margin in 2012 of 332 to 206. So contrary to Hillary Clinton being this terrible candidate who everybody hates and is so controversial, actually she's basically leading Trump right now on a state-by-state basis by approximately what the average of Obama's two margins of victory were. She's not likely to be any less successful in the Electoral College than President Obama was if you average both of his elections. So anyway, I do want to say one final thing before we get on to the rest of the program. This is about the potential pick for vice president that Hillary Clinton has to make. I don't think it'll be to the surprise of anybody that I am really hoping that she picks Elizabeth Warren. There have been some reasons given that she doesn't need to pick Elizabeth Warren. The New York Times had a very interesting article today about why she could go with the other name that seems to get floated most often these days, and that's Virginia Governor Tim Kaine. I don't think you're going to see Julian Castro. He was floated a lot early on. There was some electoral calculus. Maybe he would help get the Latino vote, but quite frankly, I can't believe there's a Latino in this country who's going to vote for Donald Trump. I have a hard time believing that if he hasn't alienated every last Latino in this country, apparently there's just some parts of the country that the mainstream media and cable news and the internet haven't quite reached yet. So, any electoral calculus about picking a Latino because she won a Latino vote, that kind of goes out the window. Tim Kaine is seen as the safe pick. He's a party establishment guy. Basically your run-of-the-mill rank-and-file Democrat. I have nothing against Tim Kaine, and I would agree that he's the safe choice. However, I think that what anyone who is thinking that she should pick Tim Kaine is underestimating, and this is something that I know a little bit about because I walked in these circles, and this is the disdain that the left wing and the Bernie Sanders crowd have for Hillary Clinton. I think it's very important that she pick Warren for the simple fact that this is the one hope, this is the one chance that she has that she can essentially make a bold move to unite the party, okay? As much of it as you can. And I do understand that there are plenty of people on the Bernie Sanders camp who are going to call Elizabeth Warren a sellout. They're morons. She's not a sellout, okay? And in fact, biggest force working against her nomination as vice president are Hillary Clinton's own donors from Wall Street and the big business, etc. So it would also send, I think, a signal to the rank and file and to the left wing of the Democratic Party, if she were to pick Elizabeth Warren, that she's not, in fact, beholden to these folks. Another way to look at it, though, cynically, Elizabeth Warren can probably accomplish more in the Senate than she can as vice president. If you want to know how unimportant the vice president is, just try to think of anything Joe Biden has done in terms of legislation in the last 8 years. So actually, while it would be nice, and while it might set her up for a run, although she would be, I think something like 75 8 years from now, if that would be an 8-year run, because generally a vice president doesn't run for president if the incumbent is not reelected. So it would have to be 8 years from now. She'd be 75 years old. It's a little bit old to be running the first time, although younger than Bernie Sanders. So anyway, putting all that aside, I don't like it when Democrats play safe or capitulate or compromise, which they do all the time. I want to see a bold pick. I want to see her pick Elizabeth Warren. I hope she does. One of the big things that points to this is that Elizabeth Warren was originally slated a very prominent speaking role in the convention, and she was pulled from that speaker slot. And first thing I thought is, well, she's going to be the vice president. That's why they pulled her. That's why they don't want her to speak early. She's got to speak at the end. I think it would be a huge mistake to deny Elizabeth Warren a speaker's part and not name her vice president. In other words, shut her out of the convention completely. I can't imagine a worse miscalculation that the Clinton campaign could make at this point. So I'm hoping that I'm wrong about that. I'm hoping that she does go with Elizabeth Warren. To anyone out there who's saying, well, do you really need 2 women? Why not? We've had 88 men so far be the presidents. I mean, why not 2 women? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And again, I think that that's the kind of bold move that needs to be made by the Democrats to really show their commitment to this stuff, to show their commitment to all facets of the party. And you would lock in the feminist votes, which a lot of that was supporting Bernie Sanders. You would lock in the left wing of the Democratic faithful anyway. You might get some Sanders support. I think, as time moves on and as Trump and Pence become even more and more offensive, I think it's going to be a lot harder and harder to justify people voting against a Clinton-Warren ticket from the Sanders camp. Now, I'm sure there's some Sanders folks out there listening. You say they're going, no way, never Hillary. Yeah, if that's how you feel, then I guess she wasn't counting on your vote to begin with. But 347 to 191 at the moment, I'm not going to be worried until you guys should be. All right, we're going to go on now with the rest of the program. We're going to pick up where we left off last week with my guest Melanie Tubbs. We actually talked for about a half an hour or so from where we left off in the show. I'm going to pick things up with We're going to go back a couple of minutes and pick things up with the clip from Stephen Fry.
Suppose it's all true, and you walk up to the pearly gates and you are confronted by God. What will Stephen Fry say to him, her, or it?
I will basically, what's known as theodicy, I think. I'll say, bone cancer in children? What's that about? How dare you? How dare you create a world in which there is such misery that is not our fault? It's not right. It's utterly, utterly evil. Why should I respect a capricious, mean-minded, stupid God who creates a world which is so full of injustice and pain? That's what I would say.
And you think you're going to get in on
No,
that?
but I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want to get in on his terms. They're wrong. Now, if I died and it was Pluto, Hades, and if it was the 12 Greek gods, then I would have more truck with it, because the Greeks they didn't pretend not to be human in their appetites and in their capriciousness and in their unreasonableness. They didn't present themselves as being all-seeing, all-wise, all-kind, all-beneficent. Because the God who created this universe, if it was created by God, is quite clearly a maniac, utter maniac, totally selfish. We have to spend our life on our knees thanking him? What kind of God would do that? Yes, the world is very splendid, but it also has in it insects whose whole life cycle is to burrow into the eyes of children and make them blind. They eat outwards from the eyes. Why? Why did you do that to us? You could easily have made a creation in which that didn't exist. It is simply not acceptable. So, atheism is not just about not believing there's a God, but on the assumption that there is one. What kind of God is he? It's perfectly apparent that he is monstrous, utterly monstrous, and deserves no respect whatsoever. The moment you banish him, your life becomes simpler, purer, cleaner, more worth living, in my opinion.
I've watched Stephen Fry.
Yeah.
The thing that he says is, if I go to heaven and I find out I've been wrong all these years and there's God, what am I going to say? And he says, basically, God, you suck. What are all these bad things?
Yeah.
What all these bad things happen? All this kind of stuff. Well, there's actually a name for that. Mm-hmm. It's called theodicy. And what that literally means is, how do we reconcile the bad things that happen in the world with good, all-powerful, loving God?
Epicurus, basically.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Sure.
And so it's a bit Well, I'm going to answer that for you.
Oh.
I do not believe at all that a 6-year-old child who is diagnosed with leukemia was given leukemia by God. In fact, I think that is absolutely ridiculous. And I think that you can strike that up to stupid things that Christians say.
Okay,
when you
sure.
go into a parent and say, this was all a part of God's plan.
Right.
Because if God intended for my child to have leukemia, then screw him. I don't want to be a part of that either. So here's the thing. We live in a world where power lines give entire towns brain tumors. We live in a world where the stuff that we eat is more chemical than it is food. We live in a world where we explode things and spray things and create things that are horrible for our body.
Sure.
And yet, we think that there's not going to be consequences for that. Diseases do not come from God. Earthquakes and tsunamis, I just sat in front of the TV and cried as I saw these pastors saying that Hurricane Katrina hit the coast because of the sin in New Orleans.
Oh, and some said it was because of our acceptance of gays. Some said it was because of abortion. Some people blamed feminists.
Hurricanes and earthquakes, those things happen because if they don't, our earth will overheat and we can't live on it. Those are physical laws of nature.
Yeah.
God does not create those things. He does not make those things happen.
Well, but do you believe in any of the, I mean, okay, not literal creation story, but I mean, how about intelligent design? How about the idea that God set up the laws of the universe? They could have been slightly different, and we'd have a slightly different universe. And why? I mean, one might say, well, hey, if you don't want to be buried in lava, don't build a town under a volcano. But there are very few really safe places on Earth. I mean, where something bad is not going to happen to you. So I can't necessarily blame people who live in, the plain states for always seeming to be in the tornado's path.
Right. Or I live in a river valley, the Arkansas River Valley, which is a tributary of the Mississippi River, and every 100 years or so there's a horrible flood. It wipes out towns, and as soon as it goes away, they build those towns right back on the Mississippi River. And so,
it goes back to what you were saying about humans making bad decisions.
Yes.
Right.
Making very bad decisions.
Okay.
And that's okay. I understand that we're going to do that, but do that with some sort of plan in place to get the heck out of the way when the flood comes.
Right.
Because it's going to happen. This is the earth, and it has to operate according to the laws that keep it alive and, well, and that includes rain and tsunamis and, all this kind of stuff.
Sure. God
doesn't make those things happen. For me, and this will take me back to why the Bible's important to me and why I think religion is good.
Okay.
For me, God is the grace that can be found in the comfort and the help that is brought to people who do suffer.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the Methodist Church, when you look at charity and people who jump in and help during catastrophes and things like that,
right.
and they'll put out lists every year that say these are the charities you don't want to give to because only 10% of your money actually goes to the people you think it is, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
UMCOR, UMCOR, is the United Methodist official crisis response, charitable organization, is always at the top of the list for being a good charity.
Right.
We have, as a connectional church, a universal church, we pay in apportionments, and some of that money goes into larger mission fields that little churches like I pastor would not be able to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And they are on the ground immediately, anywhere where help is needed.
Right.
And to me, that's the insertion. That's what religion should be.
Okay.
That's what being a Christian should be. That's what being a Muslim should be. That's what religion should be.
Right. Well, okay, then let me counter that with another point. I did not prepare you for this one, but you may have heard it. And this one comes from Chris Hitchens. Now, I have to admit, and before everybody rolls their eyes, I despise Chris Hitchens literally any time he's talking about anything other than religion. The man is literally wrong about everything else under the sun. But I think this is an interesting point, and this is being said in light of, and I'm just going to say it now. I think that lately, religion has a bit to account for at the moment. We have had a Muslim shooter go in and kill 50 LGBT people, Christians who offered thoughts and prayers, but at the same time supporting politicians who refuse to do anything about guns, who voted against protections for LGBT people from discrimination, hate crime, etc., the very next day, not to mention the long history of it. And, I mean, okay, there will always be assholes in the world, to borrow the term from your son, if you'll pardon my... but why religion seems to be the go-to defense, their go-to cover every single time. And this is the quote from Hitchens, that in a secular society, in an agnostic or atheist society, you will have good people who will do good things. You will have evil people who will do evil things. But to make a good man or a good person do evil things, first you must give him religion. And think about this in terms of what motivates that shooter, what motivates these politicians, what motivates hate groups and whatnot in this country, because there's Christian terrorism as well. The guy who set off the bomb in the Target bathroom 2 weeks ago over the transgender policy. You know, these are not people.
The Orlando shooter did not go in and shoot up that bar because he was a Muslim.
No, I'm not suggesting that is the case, but there are plenty of Muslims and Christians, and it's not unique to Islam. It just gets very well publicized in the media, overly so.
Right.
But again, I've never heard a story of a humanist strapping a bomb to themselves, going into a crowded marketplace and blowing themselves up in the name of there not being a God. It's a very odd, it's a very odd argument to make, I suppose.
Well, I believe with all my heart that one of the things that's going to have to happen before we can start to see any sort of improvement in these mass shootings that have been taking place is a much better understanding, a much more open discussion, and better prevention for mental illness.
Okay, sure.
I think that people do things and say they're doing it in the name of religion. But for anybody to be able to, I saw a meme the other day on Facebook that listed like the last 10 mass shootings, and it was like white guy with a gun, white guy with a gun, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that when you look at those people, obviously there was something. I mean, they said the guy, I forgot his name now, I'm trying to remember the names of
which was the event?
The Orlando shooter.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't recall.
But he had been already looked at, and people knew that there was something wrong and that he was just a little off, and he had been questioned, and
he'd been investigated by the FBI twice for terrorism
and all this
charges.
stuff. And so addressing those types of problems and helping people and not being ashamed to admit I have this thing going on in my head and I don't know what it is, and seeking help and having readily available health insurance that pays for mental illness and medication and all that kind of stuff. I think that's how we're going to go about combating that. Okay. And I think it has a whole lot more to do with that than it does with religion.
But at the same time, you will have... And I'm not accusing, certainly I don't hear this from Methodists too often. Scientologists are notorious for this, but I think there are other pseudo-religious groups, if you will, that will, essentially stand in the way of treating mental illness. Psychiatry is evil, psychiatry is some liberal plots, etc. And of course, when I think of most prophets, when I think of Joan of Arc, I don't immediately think of a saint that was hearing the voice of God. I think that she was probably schizophrenic.
Right. And, I get that. And I, too, look at history sometimes and think, was that really something divinely inspired, or, did they have a bad piece of fish?
Yeah.
Certainly we can see some of that. But I think the difference is that people who are really, and I do believe that people are divinely inspired. Let me say that. I think there are preachers today. I read their works, and I'm inspired by the way that they interpret the Bible and the way that they bring grace into the struggle with life and trying to live a better life. And I know that there's something inspiring them to reach out to people like that. And I believe that's the divine. I believe that's God. I think that's very different than somebody who says that they're hearing a voice or whatever, and that voice is telling them to go get a gun.
Well, yeah, except that again, of course, within the self, one's faculties are already compromised. And of course, there are all too many people out there who, in the name of their version of religion, their version of Christianity, their version of Islam, will wind that person up and point them in the direction and let them go. And no, I do not for a minute think that if we got rid of religion, that we would get rid of hate, that we would get rid of violence, that we would get rid of, but if for example, if I wanted to go and kill somebody, and I am under no illusions that I'm doing this for any greater good. I'm not doing this because God wants me, because I don't believe in a God, and I certainly wouldn't believe in a God that would want me to kill somebody anyway. I have to take responsibility for my actions. I have to justify that to myself. I have to live with the consequences.
I see what you're saying. You're saying if we remove religion, we take that excuse out.
Well, yeah.
People can't hide behind it.
Right.
Well, they would hide behind something else.
Well, yeah, but they got to come up with something, and it's going to be a lot less convincing, I would think. And even within the self, I think you might reduce violence a little bit, because it's kind of like, if I have to take accountability for my actions on a personal level, and I cannot attribute this to a greater power wanting me to do this because they must hate, well, you created God in your own image when he hates all the same people you do, right? So.
Right. Well, let me also remind you that you would be taking out, and I'll use my little churches here.
Sure.
We have a food pantry.
Yeah.
And this is, I told you how small the communities are, and the school here services about 500 kids, and some of them ride a bus for about an hour to get here because it's so rural, and they've consolidated a number of the teeny tiny schools together to create this, 500 kid school.
Right.
And so, people are literally, they come in from all of these little outlying communities, and they don't have a lot of resources.
Right.
There aren't a lot of places, just down the road, in the largest town in our little area here, there are like 5 or 6 different food pantries, and at least one of them is open every day during the week, and all that kind of stuff. Well, we don't have that around here.
Right.
And so even as the little churches that I'm in have dwindled in membership and they've aged as far as the congregation goes, I watch these little, anywhere from 60 to 80-year-old women who go into this food pantry, and they work and fill the boxes, and they come in and they may service 80 families in a 4-hour period to get them boxes of food. I also figured out that in town, if somebody comes through town or somebody moves in town, and they let it be known, maybe they go into one of the churches in town, or sometimes they go in the city hall and they'll say, we just moved here and we don't have any money and whatever. It's very common for whoever they talk to, no matter whether they're in the post office or a different church, to go, oh, go find those Methodist people. They'll feed you. Yeah, those Methodists, they'll get you food. They'll find those Methodists.
Sure.
And so it's literally my cell phone number that's on the sign outside our church. On our marquee, that's my cell phone number.
Right.
And I cannot tell you how many times that I get a phone call from a number I've never seen, and they say, we ran out of money and we don't have any food, and I got 2 little 80-year-old women who will meet them down there in a heartbeat and load them up. That happens because we come together, and we have a place that we can come together, that we can plan together. None of us would have the resources to have a food pantry on our own.
Sure.
But we come together, and in fellowship and in a common sense of trying to live like Christ and trying to love our neighbor and trying to be the best that we can be, we have done this for this community. And that happens all across the country, all across the world.
Right.
So doing away with, I see the Methodist Church as being my medium. That's my venue through which I can work to love my neighbor.
Well, you know what? I will end by saying this then. If there were more pastors and preachers and ministers like you, I would have far fewer problems with religion in general. So I wish you all the best, and there's certainly no beef between us. So
thank you. And I completely understand that at the very bottom of this, there's the understanding that I believe in something that you don't. And so it makes it hard sometimes for us to come to agreement on some of these things. I think you seem like a super nice guy, and I think you would fit right in our congregation, and we'd love to have you fill some boxes at the food pantry.
Well, I would certainly not be opposed to doing that. And I guess the unfortunate thing is I was raised Catholic, and they lost me at about age 5. So, and that was that. The reason this is a little bit humorous, but the reason that I was raised Catholic because that's what my parents were. And they lost me at age 5. I went to Sunday school, and we were talking about the story of Genesis, of all things, and they went through the 7 days that Earth was created, and there's man on the 7th day. And now, as a child, I mean, all kids love dinosaurs, but I was really into dinosaurs. I read about dinosaurs. I read books on dinosaurs, and I had a good sense for a 5-year-old kid how long dinosaurs were around for and how long before they died and humans came along. So I kind of raised my hand, and I was like, sister, because it was a nun teaching the class, sister,
right?
You skipped the best part. Wait a minute. What happened? Where's all the dinosaurs? Now, I don't remember. I was 5. I do not remember what she told me, but I remember it was not nearly enough to satisfy even a 5-year-old. I walked out of that room going, yep, this is a bullshit story. Okay, we're not, and that was it. They lost me on that day. And I mean, I wasn't an atheist from age 5 on. I'm not an atheist now. I wasn't agnostic from age 5 on. But I never experienced faith the way I have witnessed other people experience faith from that day on. Because I always go back to that. I'm just like, you can ask any of those questions and you sort of get the, well, I don't know. Like I said, I don't remember her answer. I just remember walking out there going, "Okay, these people are lying to me. This is bullshit. I gotta remember this."
Yeah. Well, you were laughing about my son earlier.
Yeah.
You're gonna really love this. He was in his junior high Sunday school class, and they were discussing Job.
Yes.
And the teacher was not exactly, she was quoting specific scriptures and sort of ideas about Job, but Lucas had a real problem with Job because for him, he thought, so God had a bet with Satan and did all this crap to Job. And, for him, he had actually studied that a lot.
Right.
And that was one of the things he was looking into as he was struggling with his own faith. And so he, raised his hand and asked a couple of questions, and he got kicked out of his Sunday school class for asking these questions about Job, and he never went back. I never made him go back because the way that he had been treated about it.
Right.
He understands and can talk about the stories and the things of the Bible, probably as well as many pastors.
Right.
And ironically, his paying job is he is the music minister for one of the churches. Yeah.
Wow.
And they absolutely love him, and he's a complete blessing to him, sort of in spite of himself,
Yeah.
And so he can be agnostic all day long as long as he's loving his neighbor and,
Right.
and being a good person, and then I'll claim him.
And it doesn't sound as though you would kick him out for being gay or anything like that.
Oh, good Lord, no.
In theory. I mean, hypothetically, I don't know of your son, of course.
No. Oh, good Lord, no. My husband used to joke, before we were divorced, Lucas was 5 years old, I think, and knew every word to every song in Phantom of the Opera. And so when Lucas first started showing signs of being interested in girls, my husband was like, he was like really concerned that he had, was going to have a Broadway musical performer on his hands.
Right.
But no, for me, God created, if it's living and on this earth, then it is living and on this earth exactly the way it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that way about every human being. It is not up to me to determine how you were created and what you are. That's not my job.
Right. But again, though, it's obviously, I mean, you and I don't have a personal problem with you or the fact that you believe or the fact that you preach, because you're preaching a lot of the same values that I am from a different perspective. But so many do not. And that's my thing. And
I know.
I realize there are good people, and I realize there are bad atheists. There are. I mean, there's no question. There are bad liberals. There's no question that there are.
Well, I will tell you this.
Mm-hmm.
I assure you that you, as an agnostic,
mm-hmm.
do not have your heart broken any more than I do as a Christian pastor, listening to some of the things that are said and done in the name of Christianity.
Right.
I see, immediately after the Orlando, there was a video going around. Some Baptist pastor in Texas or somebody posted a video about how he wasn't bad and he wasn't crying. They were gonna die earlier anyway because they all have AIDS. And,
Jesus.
Seriously, it was horrible. And
Right.
I just sat in front of it thinking, and he stands in a pulpit
Right. Well, yeah.
every Sunday.
Right.
And people follow him because they see him as a leader.
Yep.
It absolutely breaks my heart. And to be honest, that's a bastardization of the faith that I have.
Well, it is, but, and I've not done any scientific study, but I would submit that you are in the minority among Christian preachers if you look at everything, not just maybe the Methodist Church, but look at everything. Look at Catholics, look at Baptists, look at fundamentalists, look at every little cult church here and there. I think your viewpoint's a minority viewpoint.
I think that there are more of us than you think.
I'm sure there are more than I think, because I didn't believe there were any.
I think that many of us have been afraid to speak up, and I think you're going to start seeing that change.
I would. Well, this is my little bit of evil. There's a part of me that says yes, I would love to see that, because of course it will make the world a better place, and we can't. I would never want to stop that. There's that small little devil on my shoulder goes, yeah, but if they get better, man, this whole religion thing is going to stick around. Maybe they ought to just stick to the fire and brimstone, and they'll die off and go away.
Right. It is incredibly important that people like you and I begin to have conversation.
Yes, that's why I wanted to do the show, because I feel the same way.
Yeah. I think probably more will come out. I get in trouble. I'll say in trouble. Anyway, I take a little flack from the fact that I write for a website that's literally called Liberal America.
Sure.
And, there are ads on the site that are, undesirable, and people use bad language, and they use clickbait headlines and all that kind of stuff. But what I tell everybody is, if I write for something like Patheos, then I'm writing for the people who are already getting up and going to church every Sunday morning.
Sure.
If I write for Liberal America, those are people who probably are never seeing a Bible scripture ever, in their day. I mean, I'm probably the only time the word pastor, crosses through their news feed.
Yeah.
And so I'll take the erectile dysfunction ad and the, expand your boobies ad and all that. If it means that I get to talk to the people who aren't hearing it.
Sure. Well, but it's one thing to bring scripture to liberals, but what about bringing liberalism to the believers?
Hey, I'm doing my damnedest for that too.
Okay, good. Glad to hear it.
I'm trying. I'm little. It's small here.
Now, we've discussed a couple of books from the Bible now, Genesis and the book of Job. I want to play you something. This is a clip I was discussing with a regular guest of mine, and longtime listeners will know where this clip is coming from. This followed a discussion of, a brief and humorous discussion of the story of Noah and the Great Flood. The question we were originally answering was, where did Noah keep the termites and woodpeckers on the ark? But he answered that in his very humorous way, and then he asked a more profound question. Now, this is a bit humorous, but I wonder if you could take a listen and give me a semi-serious response. I'm curious to get your take on this.
The more important question is, why didn't God hate fish?
That is an important question.
Yeah.
Do you have a theory on that?
If God wanted to wipe out life out on Earth with the flood and everything else, he said, well, that's all right. I don't mind the fish surviving, the whales, octopuses, stingrays, jellyfish. God, the jellyfish were allowed to survive. He wiped out, apart from two of each creature, he wiped out all the little lambs, all the lovely little cute little lion cubs. Oh, yeah, no, they didn't matter. But he let stingrays
and
jellyfish particularly, right? Jellyfish, they're horrible creatures. They do no purpose whatsoever. Oh, no, they were fine. He didn't say, oh, yeah, for 40 days and 40 nights I'm going to evaporate the oceans. No. He put all the lovely little animals, all the monkeys he killed. Breaks my heart.
Now, assuming this was being presented as a somewhat serious question, how would you answer that?
And I'll tell you, my answer to that would have been, I don't believe in a literal interpretation.
Well, yeah. No. But if we're to believe the lesson of the story, God apparently had no problem with fish.
Let me tell you, if people who have never actually sat down and read the Old Testament as a story, just front to back, really have, I mean, oh my God, he would turn to his people and say, go murder them all, women and children.
Oh, yeah.
20,000 people in a day. And
the God of the Old Testament was a bit of a dick. I mean,
oh my God, he was pissed all the time.
Yeah.
And so that's where the idea of grace becomes so important, because I really think at some point, it's like, well, that's not working. Telling them to kill a ram and, make sure they do something specific with its testicles before they burn it and all this stuff is not making people be good. There has to be a better way. And that's when Jesus comes on.
Sure.
Now, you said earlier, I can't let you go until you answer this, that I had a trump card.
Oh, that was abortion. A trump card was abortion. I specifically did not want to bring up abortion because that would, in my experience, that usually derails the whole subject. But it is the one thing I will concede that any religious person, if they want to say that the scripture or their belief that is otherwise, in my opinion, thoroughly hateful and detestable, and I hold nothing but contempt for it, it's the one time if they wanted to say that they were more moral than a humanist. Abortion is typically the one that I have a hard time arguing, because I also think abortion is immoral. But as you were saying, I wouldn't presume to impose my opinion upon another person. But it's kind of like if I were to say, well, humanism is so wonderful. Well, we support abortion. So that's kind of the trump card that if you really want to say that liberalism has an immoral aspect to it from a Christian standpoint, I have to concede abortion.
Right.
That's a tough one.
For me, that's what I was saying earlier. For me, I could never have an abortion. And I'm not saying that as somebody who, well, you've lived a cushy life and you don't know what, women are like. I was 18 and I was married, but my husband had left.
Right.
And so this was my daughter's father.
Right.
And I made an appointment. I mean, what are you going to do? You're 18 years old, And I could not do it.
Yeah.
And so I know that I cannot have an abortion. And I personally want to find a way for there never to have to be an abortion.
Right.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
But making it illegal isn't the way to do that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it works so well with drugs, right? It's working.
Exactly.
So, but of course, the flip side of that is, and yet we talk about that's how we're going to solve the gun problem. So that's where the politics gets all mixed up, but.
Right. And, it's funny because living here in the South, I assure you, people think of their guns like I do my Bible.
Right.
I mean, it's almost a religion down here.
Yeah.
And seriously, within minutes of the Orlando shooting hitting the news, I had people who were posting on Facebook.
Obama's not coming for my guns.
Gun, yeah. That kind of thing. And it absolutely breaks my heart. And all I'll say about that is I'm not a legislator whose job it is to figure out what to do about this.
Right.
And but I'm ready for them to start doing their job.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, it would be about time. It's been 7.5 years, so it would be nice. Yeah. Oh, the one thing about the guns, too, that I think is lost on a lot of people because they think of it as a liberal-conservative split. And it isn't. It's an urban-rural split.
Yeah,
you find yourself a Republican like my father who worked in New York City. He's very much against guns because if he ever saw one, it was likely to be pointed at him. Right. Whereas you can take a liberal from the South, and some of their fondest memories might have been hunting trips with their parents. It might have actually been a practical way of finding food. I mean, it's a completely different look. And so when you're raised around guns, regardless of your political affiliation, and the reason it becomes liberal and conservative is, of course, rural areas tend to be more conservative, urban areas tend to be more liberal. So it's a correlation, but not a causality. It's sort of it gets confounded because it's really an urban-rural split. Anyway, I definitely appreciate a lot of the stuff that you've written and your criticisms of what Christianity has kind of become for so many people are exactly what mine have been this whole time. And again, if Christianity had always and entirely been as you see it, well, my God, I probably would have. I probably would be a Christian. I would be a believer, but we'll see.
Hopefully, there will be more people who feel comfortable in saying that's not my religion.
Right. Right.
And I think that that's what it's going to take.
And it's the same where all the moderate Muslims argument too, because you don't see a lot of imams and scholars and even lay people criticizing the more violent or the way Islam is misused, for example. You do. The media doesn't really want you to hear from them, but a lot of times, again, they face a much worse threat, even because, especially if they're doing it in those countries, that gets you killed.
I do believe, I mean, like I told you, the stuff that people don't see on Facebook is the people who inbox me and say, I'm transgender and my family turned me away and my pastor told me I'm going to hell. And I just want you to know that it gives me such peace to know that there's a pastor in my church, my denomination, that doesn't think I'm an abomination and thinks that I'm, valuable.
Right. Well, I really do appreciate this conversation. I'm glad that we had this time, and yeah, I would definitely be interested in talking in the future. And it's not likely I'm going to ever get down to Arkansas that I can foresee, but certainly if I ever was and there was something going on, I would certainly be interested in coming by and helping out. So
that
I really
great.
do appreciate
we would
it.
welcome you. And we are a dry county, but we have more bars than any dry county I've ever known in my life with private liquor licenses.
I didn't think you could have that in a dry county.
Yeah, you would think, right? There, almost every restaurant and then we actually have bars, has a liquor license, but we're dry county. You can't go to the store and buy alcohol to take it to your house. But I would definitely take you to hear some good Arkansas local music and buy you a Pabst Blue Ribbon beer.
I could certainly take you up on that at some point, definitely.
That sounds great. Well, I have really enjoyed our discussion, and I hope you have a really great night.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Right. I want to thank Melanie for coming on the program. I really enjoyed talking to her. It is not that often that I meet an active and outspoken preacher that I share such common values with, and even if we don't share beliefs, we do share a lot of values, and I really, really like talking to her. I guess despite my cynical statement earlier that I would just as soon not have religion continue to evolve and improve itself in preference that it just die off, it is folks like Melanie, when I meet folks like them, and it's not just preachers but practitioners as well, that are truly good people and still practicing a religion, that I'm kind of shamed by that cynicism. I still possess it, don't get me wrong, folks, and for those who thought that, who were expecting me to go harder on her or anything like that, I want to make something very clear. One of the things about the way that one thinks of morals and ethics is that one has core values, one has beliefs. Values are a much greater part of the foundation of who we are. Beliefs are a little more transient. Beliefs are something that a little bit higher up. Beliefs can differ. People can have different beliefs. And I think a show like what we've had tonight and meeting someone like Melanie shows that. But she and I, from what I can tell from our conversation, share core values. And that is what the important thing is. That is where one can find common ground with religious people if you're an atheist, with conservative people if you're a liberal, etc. In some cases, there will be common values. And liberals don't speak about values that often. I think conservatives speak about it in a way that just is somewhat just cynical and reduces it to nothing more than a cheap marketing point. I think they also speak about them very hypocritically, although maybe the word means something different to them than it does to me. Well, clearly it does. We share very different values. But liberals do have values. We value different things. But when you are looking at somebody and you are saying, do I want to support this person? This could be a presidential candidate. This could be a stranger you've just met. This could be somebody who has different political beliefs from you. Ask yourself, do they have the same values? If they have the same values, you can reach them. Even if they have really crazy beliefs like an invisible man in the sky, or, hey, the Republicans are really going to do good for the working class. You can have strange and differing beliefs, but if you share those common values, you can find common ground. You might convince the person otherwise, but you may not even have to, because again, with that overlap, we can bridge a lot of gaps. And again, there are good people from all stripes, and there are bad people that share some of the same labels that you do, and it's something that we should definitely always keep in mind. Anyway, thank you for listening. Before I sign out, we are going to close with another segment of the Doctor of Philosophy. Before we do, as always, if you have any questions or comments about anything you've heard here tonight, or suggestions for future shows, guests, or topics, please feel free to email me at niceguy9418@usa.com. You can friend me on Facebook at Eddie Cabot, like my page there, Nice Guy Eddie. Leave a comment on my blog at eddiecabot.blogspot.com. Follow me on Twitter, Nice Guy Eddie Cab, Tumblr, Nice Guy Eddie Cabot, and if you'd like to support IMHO, Rainbow Radio, and the content creators that we have on, please visit my Patreon at Nice Guy Eddie. Thank you for listening. Keep it tuned to Rainbow Radio, and here we go with another segment of the Doctor of Philosophy. All right. I got to tell you one thing, because you mentioned Stonehenge very early on in this discussion here. Now, as you know, anything that anyone else in the world does, America takes it and does it better, as I'm sure you're aware. Just ask any of us, we'll tell you.
Of course you do. Yeah, of course you do.
No, I've never been to Stonehenge, but in Virginia, on the way to my brother-in-law's house, you can stop on the side of the road and you can witness the glory that is Foamhenge.
Oh, perfect.
It is a life-size styrofoam replica
of Stonehenge.
of Stonehenge.
Well, you know what? I like that idea. I think that's brilliant because I'm not a snob about this. And I was one of the last people to play the original Stonehenge festival, by the way, before it got stopped. And I stood on the Hillstone and saw the sun come up. And, it's a bit like, why can't people in that part of the world experience it and go and see it? Why not? Sure. It's fantastic. Now, what version have they done? Have they done the version of Stonehenge as it is now that is incomplete? Or have they done the complete version? I
can't vouch for its authenticity, but I believe it is the modern version of Stonehenge.
How we are now, without the full... Yeah,
exactly.
Because I think someone at some point should do a version of that, but do it because we know how it looked. We know where all the capstones were. Mm-hmm. I think someone should do a life-size version of how it looked. Yeah. Because when you walk into the stones now, you get this aura, you get this sense, and the enormity of the stones. You feel all that, and you see the ones that are still standing with the capstones still on.
Right.
But what you don't get the sense of is the outer circle, or the sort of the second circle out, had the capstones all the way round, and that would have been something to really see. So I think there you go. So hey, listen, America, you rock. Come on, keep building those Stonehenges. Come on. Let's get the big one there. And then get me over to we'll come and do a gig. We'll come and do a gig. What?
There you go.
If someone builds the original Stonehenge, we will come and do a Stonehenge gig at dawn, as we played at Stonehenge on the solstice, and we can all watch the sun come up and dance. And I will be naked for that one.
Oh.
You might not want me
promise
to be.
Is a promise. Promise
you
is
might,
a promise.
People at that age, come on, this might be in a few years' time, and I'm sure a 60-year-old naked doctor isn't going to inspire too many people, let alone me. But I've made the promise. So there we are.